I started building these raised garden beds in October, but it snowed 2 months early, so I never got a chance to finish. Like many of you, I can't wait to start working on my new spring garden. And even though it's only 3 degrees outside and everything is frozen solid, it's still not too early to start prepping for your spring garden now with indoor composting, with a method called vermicomposting. In this video, I will teach you how to set up a brand new worm bed, so come this spring, you will have the absolute best worm castings to add to your garden and have the most significant harvest you've ever seen. And if you stick to the end of this video, I'm going to give you a tip that will have your worm population exploding and keep your castings production high year-round. So, without any further ado, let's get started. The first things you'll need are two 20-gallon bins. You'll want a solid color. I only chose transparent to do this video and future experiments. The first thing we need to do is cut air holes into the bin that we plan on keeping the worms in. Along the top of the lid is best, but if you plan on stacking stuff on top of the bin, I would drill the holes just above the handle on the front side of the bin and along the back side of the bin as well. I've seen a lot of people overcomplicate what a worm bin needs to be with multiple layers and drain spouts. But if you're feeding your worms properly, you'll never need any of that. As long as the worms have air, any container that will keep them from escaping will work. Once you finish drilling the holes and cleaning up all the plastic shavings, set that bin aside. Next, we're going to need some shredded cardboard. Shredded up newspaper would work as well, but the corrugated cardboard really works best. The worms really love the glue used in the manufacturing process. To keep the healthiest and happiest worms and to produce some of the most beneficial castings takes a few ingredients. My favorite base ingredient is a fungal dominant mushroom compost. Any compost will work as long as it's free of chemicals and pesticides. Rabbit manure is probably my favorite manure for worm bedding. Not only does it not need to be pre-composted, but I think it might be the worm's favorite. If you don't know someone who has rabbits, you can easily pick up a 10 or 20 pound bag for $5 or $10 off of Craigslist or eBay in any city. Worms need to eat grit to help with their digestive system the same way chickens do. Azomite gives them that grit and provides them with over 70 trace minerals. The next ingredient, green sand, like azomite, helps with the worm's digestive system by adding additional grit for the worms, but it also retains moisture, keeping your beds from drying out and producing leachate. Next up is bone meal. This also provides the worms with a little bit of grit, but we want the calcium that'll add to the worm's diet. The second to last ingredient is an organic chicken feed. The chicken feeds assure that the worms get an adequate amount of protein and that they're getting all their essential vitamins and minerals. Once we get all the ingredients of this worm bedding put together, I'll show you what the last ingredient is. With all the ingredients laid out, let's start mixing them together. First, we dump in 2.5 gallons of the mushroom compost. Next, we dump in the rabbit manure. This is 2.5 gallons as well. And the final base ingredient, we're going to dump in 3 gallons of shredded cardboard. Then mix it up thoroughly. Now you'll add 1 cup of the chicken feed. Spread that around. You're going to add 1 cup of the green sand. And you're also going to add 1 cup of the azomite. I forgot to bring the ingredient back into the shot, but you also want to add 1 cup of the bone meal. Once that's mixed around thoroughly, you're going to add the last ingredient. Joy Dirt's liquid concentrated worm castings. This stuff is packed full of all the beneficial bacterias and microorganisms that your worm bin will need to thrive. You want to measure out 4 ounces and add that to a gallon of water. Next, fill your watering can. Then water the bedding. Wait 10 or 15 minutes after watering for the water to spread evenly throughout the bedding. Then add a 2-inch layer to the bottom of the new worm bin. Once you have the bedding leveled out, it's time to add the new worms. Here you see me adding a pound of worms. Later I decided to add an additional pound to this worm bin, since its total surface area was almost 4 feet. This worm bin could support the population density of 8 to 10 pounds, but we want to grow into that. Once the worms are spread evenly across the surface of the bedding, you want to drive the worms down into the bedding by shining a bright light over top of the bed. Once all the worms are hidden from the light, you're ready to start feeding. Start by making a small trench on one side of the worm bin. You want to fill this trench with the food scraps that you plan on composting. Then take some of the additional bedding you have and cover the food scraps with a small layer. You want to repeat this process every 3 or 4 days when you feed your worms, moving the trench over slightly from one side to the other until your worm bin is completely full. It will take approximately 3 or 4 months to fill this bin, at which time you can harvest your castings. Well, you've made it to the end of the video, so please hit that like button. And if you want to see more educational videos designed to make you a better gardener, please consider following this channel. Thank you. Now, as promised, the trick to exploding your worms' population and maximizing their production is heat. And the way we get consistent heat is with a probe thermostat and a heat mat. If you keep your worm bin at a consistent 77 degrees, you will literally double the number of worm castings and the number of cocoons that your worm farm produces, versus letting it fluctuate with the ambient temperature. Well, that's my pro tip, and that's all I have for you today. Please be sure to check out my next video where I go into details about how to feed your worms. Also, if you want the extraordinary benefits that worm castings will bring to your garden, but you don't want to put in the work of having to harvest your own castings, then visit joydirt.com and pick up some of the finest castings on the market. Thank you.